Do you have a career point of view in your firm? If you don't, you're basically printing a license to walk out the door. We spend our days talking to people leaders and learning and HR experts across a range of industries, from tech, finance, banking, insurance, to defense, energy, and creative industries. And most people look stumped and stunned when we ask about their career philosophy. So today we're going to give you the ins and outs, the hows, the whys and wherefores, and we'll critique the career philosophy of two top global firms. So stick with us today as you'll discover what a career philosophy is and isn't, so you can get a handle on the concept, why you urgently need one and the cost of not having one, how to uncover what you already know about your organization's point of view on careers and shape it into a simple, clear statement, and real-world examples where we critique what's working and not working on major brands' career websites. Join us as we go under the career bonnet at Netflix and Siemens. So let's get started. Welcome to The Career Equation, a practical formula for career conversations that helps businesses and their leaders to engage, retain, and grow their talent.
Hosted by Erica Sosner, Career Equation creator, and Zoe Schofield, careers expert and equation enthusiast. Zoe, this is a really common missing piece, isn't it? Because we spend our days talking to organisations about career conversations, about the dialogue, about the relationship that they have with their people around their careers, and how powerful those conversations can be when it comes to retaining and engaging talent, especially if you have a consistent and simple framework like the equation that makes those conversations high quality, high value, and consistent, easily repeatable, easily scalable. So everyone kind of has the similar language and navigation system in the business. But in the absence of a kind of meta level above that, of a point of view around careers, organizations can really find themselves a little scuppered because they're going straight into tactics without strategy, if you like. And so the session today is really all about putting together your thinking about what your strategy is on careers, what your aspirations for careers in your organization, how they should look and feel, and how do we begin to articulate those as what we call a career philosophy. So, for example, last week, a new client contacted me from a telecoms firm. They were asking about career conversations training for their managers. Now, this is a really common ask. People come in, first of all, saying, I want to just train my managers to get better at this particular tactic. Now, I'm all for practical education, you know that. But first, I always want to know what is already working, what is already being done that supports career navigation within that organization. And what does a good career look and feel like in that organization? What is the hope, the aspiration for how people mobilize through your business? And most of all, what is it then that you promise? What's your sort of relational promise about the career that I can have in your firm? And this is the bit where most firms will fall short. When I ask the question straight up, do you have a career philosophy? What are your hopes and aspirations for how people navigate their careers in your business? They usually have a vague idea of it, of kind of the values that sit behind their intention. But how does an employee actually find or engage with that philosophy and point of view if it's just a set of vague values, notions or principles? Where would I go and find that? And that I can't find that, what does that say? What does that tell you? So this always comes as like a, and indeed in this conversation, just a big aha of like, oh, like that's a massive gap. Isn't it? Like, what do we think about careers in our business? Where could someone go and find that point of view? What are our hopes and dreams for them? What support is in place for the volatility that we're now in, for example, talking about the fourth industrial revolution, talking about AI and its displacement of, professional skills that have been hard won, the kind of economic volatility caused by global world events. Like, do we have a point of view about where and how we might step in alongside you when sort of acts of gods happen around careers. So mostly the answer is, oh, I never thought of that. No, we definitely don't have it. I could see why that would be useful. Where would that sit? How do we begin? And I just always want to kind of give that piece to our clients, because otherwise we could just take the work and not do any of the thinking about what's really going to support them to get the result that they want from the requests that they've made. And so that's really what this episode is about. It's about zoning back as an organizational leader to just think about this philosophy, where it might sit. And we'll also give you some practical examples of kind of, our own thoughts about career philosophies as they're presented to the outside world from some of the global businesses you'll definitely know about. So welcome to today.
Thank you, Erica. The mystery and mystique of a career philosophy. Woo! I feel like we need some music here. I guess what we're effectively saying is that it is an organization's promise to the employee. And if we don't have that, then we're kind of like stumbling around in the mist, if you like, in the dark, and probably making loads of assumptions about what work should be like in this firm, but there's very little evidence to sort of back it up. And I think if they're, even worse than that, then if there isn't anything to back that up, then we do start making things up, because we don't like that kind of vacuum, in nature do, where there aren't answers and stuff. So we will start to make things up. So when there isn't a philosophy, the sort of things we start to see is that people think that there's favoritism in the organization, because that's how you get on in this place. Or they might start complaining about lack of transparency, like, well, I didn't know that, or you didn't tell me that. Or they become kind of complacent, just thinking, well, at some point, someone is going to notice me here and discover me, and something will happen. And none of those things are very good for the bottom line or performance of people, wherever they are, if you like, in the organization. So if we think about it, if we don't have a clear view of what can be expected around my career in this company, how can anything else make sense to me? Like, how on earth am I supposed to know how promotions happen, or how development happens around here, how I get recognized, how I move across and around the organization? So all of those things can be in this kind of mystique land of fog that we don't really know. So we make it up, or we go find it somewhere else.
I think your analogy of a customer promise is really good. It is like an internal customer promise. And the same way that when it's an external customer promise, we're credible, we'll give you the best price, we won't be beaten on that, or, whatever your values discipline, whether it's operational excellence or luxury, or, whatever your discipline is that's informing your business design, there's a customer promise that comes in beside that. And when that is perceived to be violated, or when it's misaligned or misunderstood, it's always really gritty and edgy, isn't it? Like, as an external customer. So I think it's useful for our listeners to think about this the same way with your internal customer, which is your talent. What is the promise that you are making about the experience they can expect given the caliber, the maturity, the aspirations of the firm? Now, the promise might be, we're a scrappy startup. We might be out of business in 6 months' time, but you'll learn loads of cool stuff that you wouldn't have learned elsewhere, and get your fingers in lots of pies and lots of exposure in the time that we have you. But we're making no promises about where and how you might grow, because it's too early to say that. That could be the promise. Yeah. So it isn't that like the promise always has to be like uber luxurious and like 10 out of 10. It just has to be in integrity with your design, and it has to be verbalized and articulated and anticipated in a way that I can set out, does this line up with who I am and how I am? So again, we're going to be doing a pretty interesting interview with Shuvo Saha, who's part of the learning community at a telco membership organization, and talking to him the other day about this. One of the advantages that telecom industries has, for example, is that it's a very mature industry. So whilst as a career, it might not be perceived to be quite as sexy as, say, for example, a data and AI startup. Actually, if you want excellence in and opportunity to experience data and AI, telco is one of the best places to acquire it, because they've been collecting this kind of data and intel and experience around since the internet started becoming a mainstream thing, right? So it's that kind of understanding of like, who are we, how are we, and how are you going to navigate and experience your career here. Another example that comes to mind for me is also our client Capital One. And in Capital One, they said, as long as we have you, we want you to consider this to be the best experience of career navigation that you have had. And that even when we don't have you, we would like you to look back fondly and still say, that was where people really invested and cared about my career. So it is that kind of values philosophy stuff that you probably already feel quite strongly about and have a point of view on. But if that customer promise isn't articulated and if it isn't aligned, or if it's really misaligned, that's when the friction comes in. And that's what we want to avoid for you, because it's a big problem. Everything hangs off it, really. Your retention, your clarity of expectations, attracting the right people who fit where you are and how you're doing things at the moment. It really is a crucial guidance piece that needs to be articulated. And if you don't have it, you really don't have much, in fact, when it comes to your philosophy. So we really want to help you today to define your own philosophy, to pull the golden threads from like what you already have, what you're already doing, and build on that to help you to really offer a level of structure and clarity about career navigation. And notice that when I say structure, I don't necessarily mean a career path, a career ladder. I just mean a structure, a strategic point of view about what careers look like. And therefore, to initiate a process where you can start to document and articulate that in a way that brings focus to your talent strategy, that helps to make all the interventions around career conversations or your career conversations model make sense, and just hone your appeal as a culture, as an environment, as an employer of choice. So think about it like this, right? What do you want your employees and alumni to say about working in your organization when you're not in the room? Exactly the same as you would about your customers. What do you want your customers to be saying about you when you're not in the room? Something good, something exciting? Then let's tuck in to see what we can do to support you with this.
Okay, so what is a career philosophy then? Let's just define it, because I think this is where organizations can go wrong. And I think the first thing to remember what it isn't, and it isn't your values page. It's not your competency framework, and it's definitely not those kind of empowering paragraphs, that you're about reaching potential that might be placed front and center of a website for sure. It's not those things. But what it is your point of view about how careers work around here, and to the piece that we already said earlier around your promise. So in other words, if your employee is asking you, how do I succeed in this organization and what resources or roadmaps exist to help support me, you should be able to answer those in sort of 3, I guess, sort of simple sentences, something that's quite clear and structured. Because that's where we kind of have this sort of misty folklore in a lot of organizations where it's all a bit hidden and people are only learning it through sort of accident or seeing how other people get promoted or copying other people, just those people who seem to survive around here. And that does become then incredibly inefficient. You're not necessarily getting the sort of responses, if you like, to movement and adaptability across the organization. There's lots of assumptions being made, or people sort of sit on the sidelines, if you like, around their own career growth, kind of in this waiting for something to happen mode. So we've talked about this quite a bit over the years, haven't we, Erica? And what we've started to do is to strip that back to a simple definition of what a career philosophy is. So do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, sure, Zoe. So this is, we try to just keep these really simple definitions that you can take away. So this is ours at the moment. And do write in if you think we can add to or refine this, because it's work in progress. But a career philosophy is the organization's clear promise about how progression and growth happen, and what experiences you can expect along the way, and what a career around here should look and feel like. A career philosophy is an organization's clear promise about how progression and growth happen, what experiences you can expect along the way, and what a career around here should look and feel like. So ideally, this acts as a really powerful umbrella for all of the good stuff that you already have going on. Things like mentoring, learning and development programs, secondments, transparency around how internal mobility is approached and supported and championed, and any reward and recognition programs that you might be running as well. But it should also be illustrated and brought to life by real world career stories from real experiences, and be an honest reflection of who you are, what you do, and what your commitment to excellence looks like in this area. And that if I am thinking about these things, then where might I want to go next? Yeah. So if you imagine, you've got your philosophy, that's got clear to me. I understand what that means, what that looks and feels like. I might then go, okay, let me find out more about stories of people who get on well here. Let me explore what the learning, development and growth opportunities might be, both formal and informal. Let me check out what internal roles are being hired for at the moment. Yeah. So what matters more, performance or potential in your context? Is it about depth or about breadth? Does it depend on the role? Are you keener on loyalty, or are you excited about mobility internally, across a group, or even beyond our organisation, as long as it's the right fit for you? Do we want to support you to be a subject matter expert, or do you want to be a people leader? And do we have different sets of career ideas in relation to those different communities? And how do we measure success? How is that all measured? So what experiences are available to support somebody's growth? How do they access them? What does good look like in terms of career in this firm? You need to be able to answer all of those questions. And usually our clients just do answer them, but like very, very quietly, often because they're a bit worried that they don't have it all worked out. And you won't. So that can also be part of your promises. This is dynamic. It's a work in progress. And we'll talk a little bit later about this sort of gap between aspiration and reality. But I really would encourage you to start to articulate and make this a live conversation with the knowledge and information that you have at the time, and consider it a dynamic evolution, because anything is better than nothing. Because as Zoe said, in the absence of clarity, people will start making things up and they will start being distracted by it in terms of the job that they're doing right now. And that's not something that we want. So the more clear you can be about what you know, the better for everyone concerned.
So let me just play that back, Erica, just for those kind of headlines there for everybody listening. What we're saying is, what matters more? How is that all measured? What experiences are available to support growth, and how do people access that? Mm-hmm. And what does good look like in terms of careers at this firm? So I think if you can start to kind of scribble your thoughts around what really happens around those things in your place, then that's a good place to start.
And, we talked a little bit already about this component of like, well, why should you have one? And the answer is that this becomes expensive as a vacuum and as a gap. Because when you don't state your career philosophy, employees invent one, or we have misalignments around expectations because they often invent the wrong one. So you start hearing things like, and if this comes up in your engagement survey, this will be ringing the bells for you. Progression is really political, or you only get promoted if you leave, or managers are real career blockers, or like talent hoarders. Or they say that they want an innovative culture, but actually they really reward safety and conformism. So none of these beliefs really start maliciously. They start as a desire to interpret what people consider they're observing in the patterns around them. But the cost of this potentially can start to show up all sorts of ways. People might start to disengage. Managers start to avoid career conversations because they're not sure on what basis they're founded and what might be possible. HR starts to build processes that people consider to not be trustworthy, or that they don't see value in investing in, and there becomes a kind of us and them that's no good there. Your recruitment potentially attracts the wrong candidates, and then you're churning through, trying to rediscover the right people and really impacting on your business continuity. Or maybe internal mobility really stalls because people don't have the confidence, or maybe even the practical skill sets for how to navigate their career within your environment. That may be something you actually need to teach them. And it's a lot of what we do with organizations is like, how can we support people to really understand the step-by-step actions they need to take to really own their career in your unique culture? So it isn't just that you'll lose retention, and you will. Your retention, will be hit by a lack of clarity around where's my future going around here and how do I talk to people about that. You actually also lose people's belief and trust, which is kind of worse. It's one of those things that you work so hard to get, and then you can lose so very quickly. And once employees stop believing, that their efforts are going to be connected to further opportunity, then performance becomes compliance. And I'm not saying that that is what is happening, that you are unfairly rewarding, but it's about that perception of like, do we have a clear expectation? Do we have a clear narrative about what we are hoping to achieve? And when we miss the mark around that, are we aware that we have missed the mark around that? Or in what ways might our perception of what we're doing not match with our aspiration and even the reality? Can we kind of triangulate those things? If we haven't set some lines in the sand about who we are and what we're about, it's quite difficult to do. And kind of the rumor mill can often take over them.
Definitely. And when it comes to kind of what the right career philosophy does then to your bottom line engagement, you know, if we talk about money to start, we like to talk about money.
Let's talk about money.
And it's not all just fluffy, nicey culture work. It hits the bottom line. You know, clarity on careers and on the philosophy will directly impact performance, as we know. And research constantly shows us that when employees understand how their effort then connects to like future opportunities, engagement begins to rise, and engagement is one of the strongest predictors of your business outcomes. And I think Gallup's done studies on this, and they show in terms of highly engaged teams do deliver, I think we've got like 23% higher profitability, 18% higher sales productivity, 14% higher overall productivity, 78% less absenteeism, which is massive, and up to 51% lower turnover. Wow. So it isn't just a morale metric. It is directly impacting the figures. You know, it is an operating margin metric. So it's not all just morale and fluffy stuff.
And again, if you think within your organization about the investments you currently make in supporting high performing teams, in understanding that performance is directly linked to productivity, this is a key leg on your three-legged stool. You know, it's really an opportunity that you can quickly start to create a firmer foundation for excellence and performance just by really starting to articulate, how do careers work around here? Because people really engage when they know what success looks like. And Gallup, again, sort of finds engagement to depend on psychological needs, really, and they are about certainty. So knowing what is expected of me and how to grow. And that's why career conversations are not just about the future. They are also about how do we, as a partnership between manager and team member, get the best out of each other and understand what success looks like in the context of the work we are doing now. Yeah. And right now, most employees do not know what is expected of them in terms of success. So, and where it can take them. You know, so again, the sort of data tells us only 46% of employees say that they're satisfied with their career development, and that their organizations are really good at explaining how growth happens. And those organizations that are good at that are able to really explain their growth trajectory and their aspirations around career, see their engagement raise up by around 61 percentage points and high performance by 39 points. So again, this is from our Gallup data. We'll pop it in the show notes for you. That is enormous. It's not about training courses. It's not about perks. It's just really about clarity, about what success looks and feels like, what's expected, how they can grow, you know, what's expected by their immediate community, managers and peers and customers, what's expected by the wider business community about what they're looking for and how you get on around here.
Yeah, and we've talked about retention loads of times before, Eric, haven't we, in terms of how the career equation can make such an impact on that. But what we have to remember is that when employees can't see a future and they leave, it's not a sort of dramatic exit necessarily. It can be kind of like quite quietly and as a bit of a surprise. You know, we know that workers want more visibility around internal career opportunities, you know, and without that visibility, then they're much more likely to plan to quit. And they won't necessarily tell you until it's too late and they've made that decision. And to your point earlier, when you were describing quite nicely your little three-legged stool, I had that in my head. Like you whip one of those legs away from the stool and it's completely unstable. It's very difficult to get that level of trust back from somebody when they feel like they've lost that in the organization and they don't believe the glossy brochures and the things you put all over the websites and, in the intranet, it's hard to get that back. So if it's too late and it's not visible and they don't understand how things work around here and it's not clear in their real experiences, then they are likely to quit. So it's not always that, organizations have got a pay problem or a manager problem. Sometimes it's just that it's about lack of clarity for people. They just don't see a future around here. So I'll go and find it somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. So to the 3 legs of the stool in my head, because I realize I haven't told you the other 2. Job fit, so the career equation, like putting, knowing the person's design and then being in a role that really suits them. Career conversations, like having an active dialogue and a modality for talking about what a person hopes for out of their work and what the business hopes for from them and how those things might align. And philosophy for me is the third part. It's the kind of stabilizing force of like, here's the lens that we all agree that we are looking for. We've got individual design, the tactic of a model and framework for great conversations and articulating our sort of career self-insight. But then we've got the organization's point of view about careers. And that's the bit I find is most often missing. So what we do know is that a good career philosophy reduces 3 expensive things. First of all, mishiring. So like you're actually finding people who are suited to your culture and how careers actually work within your environment. A manager discomfort. So, it stops managers sort of freestyling around like progression rules, but it also makes them feel more comfortable and confident about what they can and cannot promise or what they see to be a pattern within the organization. And it also reduces disengagement. So the more that employees feel that there is clarity about what the rules of the game are, the less they start getting distracted by that. And I feel like this is an important thing to say because I feel like we're in a very volatile moment. When there are sort of game-changing economic or environmental changes, like global disruptions, like wars, like the 4th industrial revolution and how AI is going to exponentially change the way that we work and whether people work at all, do you have a point of view about what you're going to do about that? Or how you're going to support your people to think about that, or how you together are going to work that through? And these pieces produce a kind of compound effect. The more that people have clarity about what it is that we are all hoping for in terms of career philosophy, the more that they believe you. And the more that they believe you and are able to really focus on the back of that and to see what's happening around that, the more effort they put into both their own careers, but also into managing and supporting and championing other people's careers and creating an environment in which everybody can perform and succeed. And of course, the more profitable you become. And I feel like there is a kind of like people understand that efforts lead to performance, lead to profit. But I think that piece about clarity and belief is something that's a bit more abstract for people and isn't necessarily the precursor that they've put in place, And actually it's interesting because it mirrors what I say about the equation. So, we're talking about today about philosophy and having clarity about your philosophy and that resulting in greater profitability. But actually the reason that the equation exists is very similar too, which is, there are lots of opportunities to go and find a new role and choose again. And, the world of work is exciting if you are, a hardworking professional person. But if you haven't got clarity about the experience you're looking for and how you're made, you could still make all kinds of errors about moving into work that just doesn't really align. So sort of this, it's kind of the meta level, actually, now I'm thinking aloud about it, of the same thing of like, get clarity, reduce options, create a framework about how things happen around here, and then focus all of your best effort, full throttle, like any other strategy, on the things that you're going to do to make that happen. So it's not a comms exercise. It's really the strategy, the mechanism that connects human motivation to performance within your organization.
Okay, so let's look at the good news. You've already got a career philosophy. It might not be perfect and it might not be voiced exactly as things are already happening, but we're not asking you to completely reinvent the wheel here and start from scratch. What we are asking you to do, though, is notice and explore what you've currently got running. And here's how you could do that. First off is to take a look at your promotions, not the criteria, but the actual decisions. So you can really get underneath then who really does progress around here. Like, how are those things happening already? Is it the specialists that seem to be doing well, or the generalist? Is it the steady performers, or the sort of, people doing standout projects, collaborators, individual stars, long-termers, or people who've only been here a short while? And just think about how well is that serving you as an organization right now? And is the process really clear around that? But also, conversely, be thinking about, well, who isn't getting ahead? Who is a flight risk? And why is that happening? And what you want to see there then is what's happening also around exit interviews. So you can start to understand, is it because progression's been blocked? They didn't see a future in the business, something that was missing from our organization that has led them to seek it elsewhere. So those are sort of some investigative, sort of like put your investigator's hat on and have a good dig around that kind of information.
Absolutely. And second of all, what career path designs really work for where you want to take your business right now? We've all heard of the squiggly career. Does that work for you? If it does, say so. Do you want people to be making more lateral moves? Say so, and explain how these are supported and encouraged and organized. Do you want people to continue to develop their seniority and expertise in a particular way? Again, say so. Just be super clear. And then third, who should people then be talking to about their careers? Is it leaders, mentors, managers, HRBPs, internal coaches, their peers? You're not sure? And when and how should these conversations be structured? Where can they find that information? How can they prep for it? And then once they've had those conversations, what do you do with the intel? What happens on the back of that? So if you're not sure where to start with career conversations, we have a great free guide to how to start a 15-minute career conversation using the career equation. It's available on our website. And again, we'll put the link in the show notes for you. And think about then, like, when senior people mentor junior people, what is it that they champion them to do? What do they really say? Get visibility, build networks, build relationships, find a problem and own it, become the expert. That's your philosophy speaking. Yeah. So have a kind of opportunity to talk with people about the best advice they give about succeeding around here. And you're going to be downloading some really rich insights to go in your philosophy, or to be indeed edited from your philosophy and improved.
And then finally, you want to distill it. And we've got a simple kind of test for this. So we want you to complete these 10 sentences honestly, not the sort of aspiration or what we'd really like to happen, the real truth about what's happening in your organization now. Remember, you can pause this section. So as I read these 10 out, you can always pause and have a scribble or come back and listen to this section again. So if you're ready, here goes. What we want you to be able to finish is these sentences in this organization. And the first sentence is, number 1, career progress is defined by ... Number 2, people succeed here when ... Number 3, we reward and recognize ... Number 4, the individual is responsible for ... Number 5, the organization is responsible for ... Number 6, movement across the business happens when... Number 7, staying and growing here looks like... Number 8, leaving well is... Number 9, and here's how we support you to make the most of your career here. And number 10, in times of disruption, here are our thoughts about your place in this organization and what we will do to think it through together. So there are 10 sentences. Go back over them again. And what you want to be able to do is answer each of those honestly for your organization. What do you think, Erica?
Yeah, I think those are really, really helpful starters for 10. But I'm going to add a little kicker, Zoe. I think you need to do this twice, right? So you need to do the first version, which probably is your kind of polished, this is what we say, this is the line to take version. And then I want you to do it, or invite you to do it, as what people in the business would say if you caught them having a private coffee. So the warts and all version of the completion of these sentences. So take Zoe's prompts, have the first go with the kind of, shiny, this is what we, hope for, and then have a go at warts and all and just see what comes out of that.
Yeah, I love that. The sort of the truth and then the real truth, because it's sort of the gap between those things, those two areas are really where the work really has to happen to turn, I guess, the philosophy into a reality and a real experience in the organization.
Yeah. And that's your strategy that comes from the philosophy. So the gap between our aspiration and our current reality. And to be fair, in anything that we aspire to, there are always gaps. And it's that trajectory of, so what are we going to do about that becomes your strategic goals around career management within the business. So we want to take some real life examples here and just give you a couple of views about what's great and what could make it even better. And we're literally going off what we see on these websites. And look, we're not saying that these companies literally state these sentences. We're just interpreting from what we hear and see the behavioral contract that their public culture and their career system seem to set up around the philosophy for employees.
Yeah, so we took a little look around Netflix.com and their kind of culture pages. I think what's really fascinating about Netflix is that they're unusually explicit in that kind of piece. Essentially what we're seeing is their philosophy seems to be saying that careers progress through performance and contribution at the highest level, or you move on. And I think what works here is that it's radical clarity. I don't think many other organizations are that explicit, and that it's really highlighting that kind of high performance density and strong cultural alignment. But I suppose what it could be costing is that then there's a sort of psychological safety varies then by individual. So like what that means to one person might, be quite harsh compared to someone else. And that not everybody wants to be in this kind of continuous sort of audition, if you like, as if I've got to like continuously prove myself. So that's kind of something so quite radical, but also like comes a bit, maybe with a bit of a health warning. I don't know.
What I find interesting about Netflix is it's kind of like the McKinsey, like chop the bottom 10, it's like, if it works for you, then it's a culture where you feel that meritocracy and performance is fairly rewarded. And, by all accounts, it is a really cool and interesting place to work. I just wonder, as you said, there is a specific kind of fit that thrives in that context. There might be some, very able and capable people who might find, as you said, that sort of perception of scrutiny, like quite anxious making. But this is what I mean about like, it's helpful to have a philosophy. It's helpful to have a kind of culture point of view around your career. This is on their So if you go to jobs.netflix.com/culture, this is, quite explicitly articulated there. As a potential employee, that's like really useful. I might be like, this is giving me hives, or like, this is music to my ears, it's helpful. That's really helpful. And then Siemens. So like we went to Siemens.com to their jobs and growth career section of the website. And I think with Siemens, when you look across a lot of their career material, which is like pretty, well documented, they're sort of well established in terms of engineering recruitment. What appears consistently, I think, as a kind of common theme is this is all about technical expertise. We value your technical expertise. We're going to really focus on your long-term professional mastery in your field of interest. We start all the way from apprenticeships. We look at specialist tracks, and we have a culture that's all about safety and reliability. So I would say, looking at this, the implied philosophy here is that progression is really a combination of having the right level of technical depth supported by us, that reliability, safety, integrity, however that looks depending on the field of work that you're in, is important, and that you are really professionally credible within your space. So, say Netflix was really about like what impact are you having? Whereas I would say that it's fairly typical, I think, for engineering firms to reward more of like trustworthiness over visibility. You can feel
no jazz hands.
Yeah, exactly right. Like Netflix has this kind of airy feel to it when I look at and listen to what they say about their careers. And Siemens has this more grounded and earthy. And I think, again, that's like right, you know, for the fields that they're in and the stuff that they produce, you know, both of them. Although, of course, there will be, you know, lots of engineers and technical specialists in Netflix, and I'm sure there'll be lots of creative thinking people in Siemens. But the point isn't really like which one is best. It's just that in both of these, it's interesting to see that the company is coherent. So employees kind of know the game they're playing when they join. So Netflix is a create impact, fast, be visible. Siemens is like earn the respect and trust of other technical experts and colleagues. And we work with a lot of technical people around their careers, and you'll hear on the very individual basis how much mastery is the way that they measure success and value. And you see that as a kind of ecosystem here as well, like industrially. So this is kind of an interesting exercise, you know, and a bit of kind of organizational anthropology. I'd invite you to go to your own website as an external and see what you're saying and what you pick up therefore about career philosophy, and maybe go to a couple of competitors as well and see what you can pick up about how they are doing or not doing in terms of their articulation. You know, it will tell you what companies consistently reward and what they wish to communicate. And by that, you can kind of infer, even if it's not explicit, the career game that the employees are actually playing. And, you know, silence also, you know, speaks volumes. So I hope you enjoy that. That's my, you know, Zoe's got a much more kind of rational exercise. Mine is like, go and spy on other people and see what you think they are telling you about the sort of lines to take versus the experience. What does your intuition and hunches tell you? So you've got, you know, both parts of your brain activated, hopefully, by today's suggestions.
Absolutely. And of course, what you're seeing there is their show reel. So when you go and look at other people's, you might be like, oh my gosh, they do it so much better than us. But do they? You know, and Glassdoor might tell you differently when you dig into what employees are really saying about the place. So there's that kind of perspective as well, isn't there? You know, absolutely. That's why I think absolutely have a look, see what's out there, what ingredients are going into their mix of the philosophy, but then your own research around what you're saying and the truth in terms of what the experience is in the organization is vital. So I think in summary then from this, our sort of top tips are, first step is you don't have to have this all figured out completely to improve clarity and expectation. But what we would say, if you can take something from today, it's that employees aren't in need of another tool, if you like, in terms of like complicated tick box structure or anything like that. What they want is a clear explanation of how effort here turns into opportunity and personal growth. And that a career philosophy is not about shiny jazz hands and powerful branding. It's about orientation for people so they understand how things move around and how they can move within those different moving parts in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this week, you know, in a little thing to try, just go and ask the leadership team, you know, what behaviors do we think actually accelerate careers around here? How consistent are the answers? How divergent are the answers? That is going to give you some really useful information. And if you can align on one or two that you all agree on, then that's a great bit of leverage to add into the philosophy that we universally agree that, you know, impact matters, or credibility and trust matters, or curiosity really matters in our organization. So that's really going to be a nice solid start. Then start thinking about what pieces of the puzzle can we articulate about our aspirations and visions around your philosophy. What is the internal customer promise to the best of our knowledge?
So that's it from us for today. Do remember Thursdays is Q&A day. So do keep sending in your questions. You can send them in via either text or you can send an audio message. We do love an audio, don't we, Erica?
We do.
Send them into the pod@thecareerequation.com and we'll make sure that we put those into a future episode. And yeah, connect with us. Tell us about your philosophy and what you've learned from answering those 10 questions and tell us where that leads you. We'd love to hear.
Yeah. Until then, take care. We look forward to hearing from your company again soon. Do come and find us on LinkedIn and continue the conversations there too. And have a wonderful week.
Bye-bye.
So for more information about the Career Equation and how it can benefit your organisation, visit the website at thecareerequation.com or connect with Zoe Schofield or Erica Sosner on LinkedIn.